Hello, hello. I am Sinner, and I am back with another book review. This book took me way too long to read, but I'm going to give myself a break because I'm back at uni and I'm a bit busy. Um, I am reviewing the an essay on the restoration of property by Hilaire Belloc. Now, this book you can't really understand unless you also read this book, which is The Servile State by Hilaire Belloc. So I'll touch on this one first. I did make a video on it like a year ago, or it feels like a year ago. I don't know how long it was ago. But basically, it's these books are about the problem with society economically and how those economic problems lead to expropriation through dynamics of power, basically. Um, the run through of the servile state is that going up to the High Middle Ages, um, or in the High Middle Ages and before the Protestant Reformation, you saw a gradual shift where economic power became more and more distributed over time. Agriculture went from, a, a villa which had one really rich Roman and literal slaves to the lord with peasants to eventually yeomen who were free landholders and a large number of free peasants. So as time went on, you saw this gradual development where more and more of the economy was in the hands of small business owners, right? Independent people who ran their own businesses, did things themselves. And politically, and economically, this leads to a unique situation where the dynamic isn't there for you to easily be expropriated for your wealth, for your health, all that sort of stuff. Because if you have your own land, your own water supply, you know, you probably your own food supply as well, and it's very hard for someone to like force you to work for them, right? And even if you're like, a manufacturer, an independent manufacturer, at least then, with all the business that you conduct, the wealth that you make stays with you. It's not going to somewhere else. There's not really that rent seeking or usury type stuff going on. Um, so basically the peak was this is the peak distributor state where the overwhelming majority of people work for themselves, are independent, are fairly well off. You know, there's the productive property is well distributed. But after the Protestant Reformation and after the income of capitalism, um, political power and primarily economic power, and then what followed was political power, but they kind of go hand in hand, became more and more centralized. Guilds were destroyed, um, and land was bought up by rich landowners. Um, Instead of small manufacturers, you had these large mega factories that did, where no, where, that forced out the artificers, and all of a sudden the political dynamic had completely changed. It went from, everyone sort of independent and free to everyone is dependent on a sustenance salary. They'll starve to death unless they get a wage from a um a capitalist. And he predicts in the servile state that what that's going to lead to is eventually the creation of a welfare state where everyone will either be utterly dependent on the state or utterly dependent on capitalism. And that lays the groundwork for socialism in the future, but we don't need to really talk about that right now. What we do need to talk about is this. This book is his way of saying, well, how can we try reversing that? How can we try going back to a state where that property is well distributed again? And the first thing I'd mention is like, I'm not really a good reader in the sense that I don't like reading. I tried my best, but I struggle, unfortunately, to read. I often read in large bursts, and this was the first book I've read in a long, long time where I thought I really wanted to read more. This is only like 83 pages long, 82 pages long, and it's with the way Hilaire Belloc writes, um, it's very easy to read, but it's not informationally dense. So every time he comes up with an idea, I'm always thinking like, I wish you explained that more. I wish there was more information you gave me because it's not a lot. But he basically talks about this idea of using the state to change economic incentive structures, basically, to promote small businesses over large businesses. So one of the ideas he comes up with for property is this idea of an exponential tax. So, and I think this is honestly low key. I consider myself like distributus leaning. I think the idea is good. And this low key makes sense to me, especially for the housing market and things like housing or like economic systems where all you're doing is rent seeking. He comes up with this idea of like exponential taxes, where he basically says that, let's say you own a business, right? You own the land of a business, or you own a business. You'll get taxed, I don't know. Let's say hypothetically it's $10,000 a year. The next one, it's 20,000. The next one after that, 40,000. The next one after that, 80,000. The next one after that, 160,000. And it exponentially grows. And what that does is it um, disincentivizes this style of accumulation where you just hoard assets and then suck rent from them like some, greedy pig. Um, and yeah, you protect the small businesses. It incentivizes small business over large business. He also said that like there should be um, uh, for example, and that's mainly targeting like chain like businesses, if that makes sense. Like think of your grocery store, right? In Australia, there's basically three grocery stores. There's Target, Woolworths, and like IGA, right? Those are the three ones I can think of off the top of my head. The big ones are Woolies, Target, and like Big W. There's not a lot, and um, if so, that means if you want groceries, if you want, you're going to the same company no matter where you are in the country, right? That doesn't really need to exist. There's no reason that that is more economically efficient than having every single independent distributor exist, right? Like having the distribution under one giga conglomerate isn't as good. And the other thing about it is it actually makes things worse because what ends up happening is once you have like a squeeze on selling the food to people, like consumers, then when they're buying the food, because they're the only ones who can buy it, they can squeeze the farmers for money. And that's something else that happens. So, like, that would actually make things more efficient, in my opinion. Economically, it would make things more efficient. So that's one idea he came up with. He came up with some other ideas like introducing a license for um, the sale of particular products. So you can't have like, you know, a big W situation or a Target or Woolies situation where, you can buy your groceries, your an Aldi, you can't you shouldn't be able to buy literally everything you need from one store because that's another form of like sucking everything up into one company, one system where everyone is then dependent on that one system. And maybe, I mean, we do it in Australia already with alcohol, and it works fine. You can't, you have to go to a registered bottle shop. You can't really just, go to any old place. But, they're starting to get around that these days with bloody uh, like IGA. They have their own bottle shop, but it's like attached to the store, but it's, you know, not actually technically in the store. They do that sort of stuff. So you go to a different like counter to buy the alcohol, but you're still buying alcohol. But yeah, and I think that idea is it's all right. One of the ideas that he keeps bringing up at the start and he teases it throughout, and then he doesn't like finish on it is the guild system. He brings up reintroducing guilds. Now this was sort of difficult for me, honestly, because I couldn't really understand what he was getting at. What I know what a guild is. It's a parallel institution. It operates kind of like a university in its structure, and although because universities did start off as guilds, and it acts half as a labor union but half as a lobby group and a regulatory body for that particular industry. It's hard to say what he means by reintroducing the guilds. And one of the things, so I really wish he talked more about that. I can't even really say if I know I agree or disagree with it because I don't really know what he means. I think because of that, I'm going to read in the future. There's a book called The Guild State by Arthur Penty, which I've seen, and that's guild socialism. I might read that maybe because that might go into this topic a bit more, understanding how you would have a guild economy as opposed to a free market economy, um, and how that distinction works. And the last thing he talked about was, oh, what was it? Ah, yes, the mutual credit bank, or the mutual credit unions. And yeah, I think that banking and the current system of banking is bad. I think the system, like, here's the thing, and this is something I really agree with. If you have an economic system where you have a fiat currency and you have interest, which is usury, by the way, um, then the financial institution, the bank, the way they make money is by lending money, right? And what lending money does is it puts people in debt. So the way you make money in a modern society is by getting as much of that society in debt as possible, by making everyone in debt. It doesn't work. Like, it's not conducive to the long-term health of the society. If you have a usury free society, then banks offer a different purpose, right? The storing of wealth. And then the incentive of the structure of the bank shifts to becoming, um, we need to, if we want to make money as a bank, we need people to make as much money as possible so we can store it, right? And that, I think, in my opinion, is more conducive to a stable, long-term, prosperous society. I think it would grow more slowly. I don't think it would accelerate as fast, but um, because there's not all this crazy spending. But yeah, I think it would be better. I think it would be more conducive to long-term stability and growth because you're basically gambling. That's what the banks are doing. They're gambling and betting that people don't cash out their money because I think the ratio of like lent money to real money is some ridiculous number. It's like 10 to 1 or something, or like 8 to 2. It's ridiculous. It's the overwhelming majority of money isn't real. It's lent, and that's cooked. So yeah, I think overall this book was disappointing, not because it was bad, but because not because of the stuff he said was like bad or like stupid. I thought his reasoning wasn't, you know, dumb, but he just doesn't say enough. It felt uninspired in that sense. Um, that being said, I think it's a good book to read. I certainly want to read more. I want to see if other people took Hilaire Belloc's ideas further. And if you know, if you've read Belloc, in the t please comment below and tell me like where can I find people elaborating on this and going further? Who's written other books about it? But that's all really. I am Sinner. Please like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.